domino. This evil destroyed David's nuclear family. You've got to ask, Pastor John, how did all of that begin? Well, it began, and I'm going to take you, and you don't have to follow me with all these scriptures. I want to preach to you this morning, and I want you to listen to me this morning. I don't necessarily have to have you following all these scriptures with me, but I'm going to let you know how it began. When Israel started to get kings over its nations, God told the kings an important aspect of leading in the kingdom. And in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17, I find these words. Neither shall he, the king, multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly increase silver and gold for himself. Point number one. God told the king of Israel, one wife. Don't multiply wives for yourself. Now, you can read verse 15 and verse 16 on your own of Deuteronomy 17. It gives you a beautiful background. David's problem is that he multiplied for himself wives. Now, I want you to understand how serious this gets. And like I said, I'm going to be switching to a lot of scripture because I want you to understand exactly what I'm trying to tell you. Now I'm reading from 2 Samuel. From 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 13. Meanwhile, look what David did. God told David not to do something. Look what David did. Meanwhile, David took more concubines and wives from Jerusalem after he came to Hebron. And sons and daughters were born to David. God said, don't take all those wives. David did exactly what God told him not to do. Do you see the viper starting to rear his ugly head? Do you see the snake? God told the kings of Israel, don't multiply wives. David had a total of 8 women in his life. And the one that he loved the best was Abigail. You remember Abigail that had that crazy husband that wanted to start a fight, and David was going to go and kill the man, but Abigail intervened, and when the man died, David took Abigail and loved her. But he had a total of 8 wives, and God told him, don't multiply for yourself wives. So we see, youngsters and olders alike, what his primary problem was: disobedience to God. The first domino is ready to tilt. The house of Domino did not do what God told him to do. Now, not only do we see that he did that, but it should be noted not only that he had 8 wives, but regardless of all the good that David did, a solid defect went unchecked. When God has told us, me, something, and I refuse to do what God tells me to do, my domino is beginning to lean. When God has made it perfectly clear in the preached word how I am to live, and I, because of my own disobedience and rebellion and selfishness, refuse to do it, young Jody, my domino is getting ready to lean. I might be a nice pastor, I might be very well in front of you, but if that thing is not right in me, that viper, my whole life is going to be destroyed. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do about it. So we should now investigate the effects of what happens when your domino begins to tilt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick survey of this man's family, his children, his love for them, and how that viper took on a different face, Ricky, and changed. He got so bad out of line that he refused to deal with the vipers in his own children's lives. You see, my friends, what I'm trying to say is, like father, like son, like mother, like daughter, like sister, like brother, like pastor, like church, like what I teach, what you teach. God says your domino is going to tilt if you don't do exactly what he tells you to do. I want to tell you youngsters something. I got some good news for you. Your lives are no different. If you choose to go in a different way, your life is a domino too, sister, brother. And when that thing starts tilting, it's going to tilt good. Your life is going to be just as messed up as mine is and was. And what is good for the goose is good for the gander. What goes around comes around. What goes up must come down. Let's look at this defect unchecked. Now I want to show you something, and I want to just jump ahead of here and show you something about one of this man's sons. Since I said that David had a problem, I'm going to read something to you from 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 5. It says, because David did that was right in the sight of the Lord and did not turn aside from anything that God commanded him all the days of his life. And then if you look at the latter part of verse 5, it says, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. David was a good fella except in one case. The viper, listen to me, the viper that was deep down in his nature that he never dealt with. Friends, that's why I'm preaching to you. Because each of us has a snake in us. And that snake is going to come out. Sometimes it comes out in the form of the foulest language that you've ever heard a Christian communicate. Sometimes it comes out in the forms of lies, habitually, one after the other. Some of your snakes is a rotten attitude, hypocrisy. You can easily switch up. Some of your snakes come out with trickery, deceit. I don't know what it is. I don't know what yours might be. I know what mine is. Do you know what yours is? Can you deal with it? Have you turned that thing over to Jesus? When you go to 2 Samuel chapter 11, we see this situation develop. And if you go to 2 Samuel, I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to give you the scenario. Children, I want you to know where he messed up. David was a king. The army was out doing battle. I preached about this a few years ago. I'll make it quick. He was supposed to be out there on the front lines doing war with the enemy. He's up in his palace and he looks out the window and he sees poor innocent Bathsheba taking a bath in her own house, minding her own business. This man looks out and sees this woman with no clothes on and freaks out and orders his guards to bring her up to his house. This man knew that this woman belonged to Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite was one of his famous generals out on the front line battling for him. David never dealt with that viper in his life. He brings Bathsheba up. He goes to bed with her. Bathsheba does not get AIDS, but she gets pregnant. Then what David does is he brings Uriah the Hittite in town and he says, take your wife to bed and so that it can look like the baby is yours. Uriah was a faithful soldier. Uriah said, I won't do that. My men are out dying on the front line. Why should I come in and make love to my lady? I won't do that. I will sleep on the porch and then I will go back out to my men. David finds out. He calls the man back in and says, are you crazy? Bathsheba's a beautiful woman. Who ought to know? He ought to know, the dirty dog. He didn't deal with this viper. He ought to know how beautiful she was. Uriah yet refuses to do that. David, the king of Israel, puts out a contract and has Uriah murdered on the front line. Lust and murder in a man that never dealt with a viper in his life, yet the Bible tells me he was a man after God's own heart. Point, you can be a Christian. You can be on your way to heaven and you can sin just like David. I'm trying to get you to deal with this viper. You might say, oh, Pastor John, how do I know the story is true? It doesn't end right there. Bathsheba gets pregnant. David marries Bathsheba. And the baby is born. The baby gets deathly sick. God kills the baby. And God says, I won't let you have the pleasure of acting like you are daddy. You're a no good bum, King David. Then he sent the prophet Nathan and he told him. You can read about David's dialogue in the 51st Psalm when